Laughter erupted before horror had the chance to take shape. In the span of a single heartbeat, Madison Clark, the woman known for her flawless appearance and a diamond ring heavy enough to scratch glass, tipped back a bottle of ice-cold champagne and poured it directly onto Ava Coleman's intricately braided hair. The golden liquid streamed down like a merciless waterfall cascading over her shoulders and soaking her pristine white dress, turning each layer of fabric into a translucent veil under 300 pairs of eyes filled with shock, thrill, and cruelty, long hidden under velvet and silk. The crowded room fell into a chilling silence before exploding into razor-sharp laughter. It was a moment Ava would never forget for the rest of her life. She didn't blink, didn't jump up, didn't react the way anyone expected. She sat still, her shoulders trembling from the cold, but her eyes were forged, steel unbroken, and burning with clarity. The crystal lights above struck her face, not to expose humiliation, but to illuminate a calm so unnerving it silenced even the boldest whispers. Madison laughed a twisted triumph that revealed more decay than victory, the same decay she had spent her life hiding behind $1,000 dinners and status borrowed from her husband. Ava slowly lifted her phone, the device slick with champagne, as if she were handling fine porcelain. 300 people held their breath. Every second stretched into eternity. Ava's heartbeat echoed in her chest, not from pain, but from the weight of a choice that could alter the fate of not just her life, but an entire multi-billion-dollar empire. "Proceed," Ava said into the phone, her voice light as autumn wind, yet sharp as a blade. One sentence, one decision, one precise and devastating impact. Across the room, Ethan Clark, Madison's husband and the chief executive officer of Clark Quantum, set his glass down the moment his phone vibrated 3 times. He had never feared a notification more. When he unlocked the screen, the color drained from his face as quickly as a building losing its foundation in an earthquake. Cancel the partnership worth $5.1 billion effective immediately. Those 7 words crushed the future of a company on the verge of its greatest breakthrough. The atmosphere in the room warped under Ethan's suffocating breath. 300 people shifted from delight to panic in mere seconds, as if they had witnessed a dark illusion unfold before them. Madison still didn't understand. She was too busy savoring her distorted moment of power, believing a bottle of champagne could drown another woman's dignity. But no one was looking at her like a victor anymore. They were staring at her like the eye of a Category 12 storm that had just obliterated everything in its path. Ethan rose his chair, scraping backward with a bone-deep crack, like wood splintering before a giant tree collapses. He stared at his wife for a long, punishing moment, so long that the silence between them became a verdict. "You just destroyed our future," he said, his voice hoarse and hollow, the dying breath of a dream collapsing. The words weren't loud or angry or cruel. They were worse than that they were true. Madison blinked, her lips parting with no sound. For the first time in her glittering life, built on money and reputation, she felt the marble beneath her feet turn into thin ice, crafted by her own arrogance. Phones buzzed across the room as every device lit up at once. Ava remained still. Champagne dripped from her hair onto the plate below, like grains of an hourglass measuring the downfall of an empire. In that instant, she thought back to 2 years earlier, the night a European executive used a racist remark to wound her at a negotiation table. She had walked away and brought down an $800 million deal within hours. No one outside her company knew that Ava had insisted on adding the integrity and public conduct clause to every Helix contract from that day on. No one knew until tonight. Ava looked at Madison not with hatred, but with pity for a woman who never understood that real power comes from character, not dominance. And Madison's character had just shattered like champagne glass underfoot. A lavish gala had turned into a crime scene of truth, revealing that someone who weaponized champagne to shame another had unknowingly pressed the button that detonated her own life. That night, champagne did more than drench Ava's hair. It ignited the collapse of an empire. And no one in that room could have predicted that this one silent moment between fury and consequence would spark a transformation that would change the lives of 3 people and reshape the future of America's quantum technology industry. Ava gently placed her phone on the table. A faint smile touched her lips, not out of triumph, but because the truth had finally spoken at the right time and in the right way. A bottle of champagne had been poured to humiliate her, but in the end, it became the weapon she used to rewrite the entire story beautifully coldly and irreversibly. 1 hour before the fateful champagne bottle came crashing down onto Ava Coleman's hair, the grand hall of the Chicago Grand Pavilion glowed like the beating heart of an elite kingdom, pulsing at the highest frequency of power. Crystal lights spilled across velvet-draped tables, reflecting off glassware, thin as breath, creating a scene any photographer would swear could not possibly be real. Everything was perfect, except for one thing, the small, sour, poisonous unease brewing inside Madison Clark. She moved through the crowd like the captain of her own gilded ship. Her smile perfectly rehearsed her nods, calculated her polite warmth, precisely what people expected from the wife of Ethan Clark, the chief executive officer preparing to sign one of the largest deals in the history of quantum technology. But beneath the flawless makeup in a place no one could see, Madison's hands were clenched so tightly the skin beneath each nail had turned red. She was used to admiring eyes trailing her at events like this. Tonight those eyes drifted elsewhere, not toward her, toward Ava. Across the room, Ava Coleman stood by the bar, her white dress hugging her tall, graceful frame as if it were stitched from moonlight. Light skimmed across her brow, tracing the neat braids cascading down her back, making her look like a living sculpture crafted from confidence and dignity. Madison watched from afar, forcing a smile, even as that tightness in her throat sharpened. There was something about Ava she simply could not bear. Was it the beauty, the rising fame, or the effortless way Ava drew attention Madison had spent her entire life earning? But the moment Marcus Hale, one of the most powerful leaders at Helix Capital, leaned in with genuine interest at every word Ava spoke, Madison felt her heartbeat skip. That was what she feared most. In this world, the gaze of powerful men was not what women like Madison worried about. It was their respect. And for the first time, Madison saw that respect directed at someone else. "The quantum chip integration timeline you proposed is extremely ambitious," Marcus said, voice low as he analyzed the woman before him. "But your data is completely sound." Ava's voice flowed, steady and assured. "Ambition creates progress. Limitations create stagnation." Helix did not grow from playing it safe. A few leaders laughed, not the laugh of politeness, but the laugh of people who had just found the person who might lead them into the future. Madison stood nearby beside the swan-shaped ice sculpture she had personally ordered 3 weeks earlier. No one cared about the swan. Every gaze was fixed on the woman Madison once assumed was merely a pretty face. Ava was not just beautiful. She was brilliant, incisive calm, and dangerous in ways Madison didn't possess in her own DNA. Discomfort rose in waves. Madison looked at Ethan from afar. He sat beside Ava, nodding thoughtfully at every insight she offered. His eyes filled with a respect Madison had never seen from him since their wedding day. A sharp blade of anger grazed Madison's heart. Not because Ethan cared about Ava, but because Ethan cared about something Madison could not give him: intellect, vision, dignity. She forced the feeling down, but it stuck, bitter, like wine not chilled enough. Then when the first drop of champagne splashed onto the marble floor as she accidentally dropped her glass, when a server brushed past the entire room, turned to look at her. Madison flushed, not with embarrassment, but because she saw Ava walking toward her, concern and pity mingling in her eyes. A look Madison could not stomach, a look that said, "You are weaker than I thought." Heat surged through Madison's face as if she were standing before an open furnace. Why did Ava have the right to look at her like that? Why did everyone see Ava as the woman worth listening to, worth trusting, worth including in the $5.1 billion deal Madison believed belonged to her husband? A question slithered into Madison's mind, dark and sharp. If Ava vanished from this picture, even for a few seconds, would the balance shift? Would the attention come back to its rightful place? The thought should have died the moment it appeared. It didn't. It sparked. It flared. It burned through whatever reason she had left. Madison wanted her place back. She wanted to remind the room this was her event, her ballroom, her world. And Ava, no matter how beautiful or intelligent or powerful, was just an uninvited guest. Under the crystal lights, Madison caught her reflection in the green champagne bottle resting on the bar, a flawless face paired with eyes burning like a woman losing the game she thought she owned. And Madison Clark didn't lose. Ever. In that moment, she had no idea that her attempt to reclaim power would not pull Ava down, but drag an entire empire into a bottomless abyss. But jealousy blinds deeper than darkness. It whispered only one thing: act, and Madison listened. Madison Clark would never admit to anyone that the moment she saw Ava Coleman sitting beside her husband, fingertips lightly touching a glass of water, her face glowing under the lights with the serenity of a living sculpture, she felt herself disappear from the room. Not a physical disappearance, but the feeling of dissolving, of being erased, of being replaced by the presence of another woman, a woman who drew every gaze, a woman powerful enough to make $1,000 suits lean in to listen. Madison, who once believed she held the social power of Chicago's elite, suddenly faced a cruel truth. Everything she owned, beauty, reputation, status, even her husband, could not compare to the radiance Ava carried simply by existing. And that realization struck the first match to Madison's toxic pride. When the new server clumsily knocked the champagne flute from her hand, the sound of shattering glass echoed like a bullet through her vanity. She bent down on instinct, not to pick up the pieces, but to hide the burning heat flooding her face as if someone had slapped her. In that moment, Ava turned. Just 1 second, a slight tilt of the head, a subtle expression no one else would have noticed, half concern, half pity. Pity. The word crushed Madison harder than a bucket of ice water. No one had the right to pity her, especially not the woman the entire room seemed to orbit. "She thinks I'm weak," Madison heard herself whisper inside her mind, sharp as a blade. And when Ava turned away to continue speaking with the Helix executives, Madison felt something tear inside her, a hiss of wounded pride, a surge of envy too loud to ignore. She stepped away from the crowd, walked straight to the bar, and lifted a bottle of ice-cold champagne from the bucket. Her hand trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from adrenaline coursing through her veins like high voltage. A reckless thought formed, shocking even to herself. If she embarrassed Ava in front of everyone, would the balance shift? Would those powerful men remember that Ava was just a pretty face, while Madison was the one who knew how this world truly worked? How absurd. Madison had never known jealousy in the ordinary sense. She didn't envy beauty or men. There were only two things she envied: power and position, and tonight power did not belong to her. It sat at the center table where Ava rested beside Ethan, effortlessly explaining complex quantum algorithms Madison had never understood, no matter how many times her husband mentioned them. Watching Ava speak, Madison felt like an unwilling audience member in a film she once believed starred her. Madison gripped the champagne bottle and walked slowly across the ballroom, like a predator stalking its prey. The click of her heels against the marble floor became a rhythm, foretelling something imminent, though no one sensed it. She stopped behind Ava, right behind the white chair, where the woman's braided hair shimmered under the warm lights. Madison paused, savoring the illusion that power had returned to her hands. "You must be some kind of very famous brand ambassador." Madison said, her voice sweet as sugar, yet sharp as metal. Ava turned, her expression gentle but unafraid. "It's a pleasure to meet you." That look, the steady confidence of someone who did not need to fight to belong, was the final drop that overflowed the glass. "Not everyone can buy a seat at this table." Madison continued, lowering her voice, as if sharing a secret. Ava replied with a sentence that nearly cracked the air itself. "Some people don't have to buy it. Some people build the table." The words hit the surface of the gala like stones breaking a calm lake. Madison's smile stiffened. Not because the reply angered her, but because it was painfully true. Too true. Too clear that she could never win a battle of words, intelligence, or worth. So she chose the only battlefield she could control: humiliation. She lifted the champagne bottle, a graceful gesture on the outside, but beneath it, cold cruelty coiled like steel. The crystal lights reflected in the stream of champagne as it fell slow and shimmering, beautiful in a cruel way, before landing on Ava's dark hair, turning the gala into a moment that could never be undone. A soft gasp escaped Ethan. A sharp silence cut through the Helix executives, and deep inside Madison, the last remnants of dignity cracked. For one fleeting second before the night erupted into chaos, Madison tasted the electric thrill of victory, of pulling Ava down in front of everyone. But she had no idea that tonight it would not be Ava who fell. It would be her. The moment Ava Coleman brushed champagne from her lashes, she was already preparing to strike back with the one weapon Madison would never touch: real power. The moment the ice-cold champagne touched Ava Coleman's hair, time seemed to compress, forcing every movement in the room into a cruel, slow-motion crawl. The golden liquid slid across her forehead, weaving through her braids, running down her shoulders, clinging to the pristine white fabric, as if determined to turn her entire being into a target for the humiliation Madison Clark had unleashed with the smugness of someone who believed she was untouchable. 300 guests held their breath. Some stifled laughter, others exchanged excited glances, knowing that moments like this would live forever on social media, long after the night itself faded. Madison smiled, the triumphant grin of someone convinced she had proven a point, the grin of a fox believing it had cornered its prey. But Madison forgot one hard truth. Some prey, when cornered, become something the hunter cannot control. Ava closed her eyes for a single second, feeling the metallic coldness of the champagne running across her lashes and neck. Anyone else might have burst into tears or jumped up to scream or fled the room like someone shoved out of the spotlight, but Ava did none of that. Her skin trembled from the cold, but her heart did not. Her heart was steel. Years spent surviving in a world that demanded she be stronger, calmer, steadier than everyone around her, simply because she was a black woman in an industry still shaped by the gaze of powerful white men, had made her unbreakable. She opened her eyes. Those eyes were not the eyes of someone humiliated, but of someone calculating. Ava looked straight at Madison. No anger, no trembling, only one thing, absolute resolve. She reached for her champagne-soaked phone, wiped it gently with the corner of a napkin, then lifted it to her ear. Not a word, not a sharp breath, just a single touch, a single inhalation. Then her voice, soft as mist, but sharp as a blade. Proceed. No one understood. Not until the phone in Ethan Clarke's jacket vibrated violently. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face, as if an invisible hand were tightening around his throat. He opened the message, read it again, then looked up at his wife as if she were suddenly a stranger. They cancelled the deal, Ethan whispered, his voice cracked and raw, but enough people around him heard it. Silence slammed into the room. Madison frowned. What deal? Ethan turned to her, his expression collapsing into a horror she had never seen in him before. Madison, you just destroyed our $5.1 billion agreement. Madison's eyes widened. What, because of a champagne bottle? Ethan, that is ridiculous. But he cut her off, bitterness dripping from every word. It is the integrity clause, the clause Ava insisted on adding to all Helix contracts 2 years ago. Any act of racial discrimination committed by a partner's family member means the contract is terminated immediately. As if Ethan's voice triggered a chain reaction, every phone in the ballroom began vibrating at once. The powerful faces of Helix Capital lowered to read the incoming notifications. Their lips tightened. Some glanced at Ava, not as though looking at a victim, but at the sovereign of a principled empire executing judgment. Madison flung her hands up, desperate to explain, desperate to put out a fire already far beyond her control. I am not racist. It was just a joke, an accident. But the moment the word joke left her mouth, the entire room froze. Because in that instant, everyone understood. Madison did not grasp the problem. She did not understand the weight of what she had done. She did not understand that some people spend their entire lives proving their worth in a world built with barriers stacked against them for nothing more than the color of their skin. Ava had understood this for years. Ethan understood it the moment he read the notification. But Madison, she did not. Ava placed her phone gently on the table, the only person in the frantic room who moved with absolute calm. A thick, chilling composure radiated from her, not anger, but a steadiness more terrifying than rage. This is not over, Madison said, clawing at the last scrap of authority she thought she had left. Ava looked at her, not smiling, not frowning, just offering a truthfully merciless gaze. No, Ava said, her voice as cold and sharp as a polished gemstone. It has just begun. At that moment, Ethan's phone chimed again. A new email arrived. He opened it, and when he saw the subject line, his knees nearly buckled. Notice of contract termination, effective immediately. Everything Madison believed she owned: her power, her reputation, her marriage, her place in Chicago's elite, her husband's future. The entire Clark quantum empire all collapsed within 10 seconds of Ava saying, "Proceed." And Ava, she did not need to shout. She did not need revenge. She only needed the truth on her side. That night, a bottle of champagne did more than drench a woman's hair. It drowned a family, a corporation, a future. And it lit the path for Ava Coleman to step into a role she never sought, but destiny had carved for her, the woman rewriting the rules of a world where the marginalized were too often silenced. But Ava had spoken, and the world would have no choice but to listen. In the lavish room, gilded from ceiling to floor, where the laughter of the elite once echoed like a symbol of untouchable power, the air had thickened into something heavy and electric, like fog before a storm. As Ethan Clark stood frozen beside the banquet table, gripping the phone that had just displayed the words, "Contract termination," effective immediately, his entire body felt hollow, as though he were standing at the edge of an invisible fracture, waiting to swallow every dream, every calculation, every achievement he had built over 2 relentless years. A few guests quietly stepped back, unwilling to stand within the blast radius of a financial disaster forming in real time. Whispers rippled outward like fever chills, but Ethan heard only one sound, the painful, pounding rhythm of his own heartbeat. Madison still did not understand, her eyes wide, not with fear of the consequences, but with indignation at being humiliated. "Ethan, you are exaggerating this. It was just champagne. There is no way Helix would. Because you..." Ethan growled, his voice shaking as he clung to the last threads of restraint, violated the integrity clause in front of hundreds of witnesses and dozens of recording devices. You did not just insult Ava. You disgraced the entire Helix brand, and they do not partner with people like that. Madison froze for a moment, recoiling as if slapped, but within seconds she rebuilt her walls of pride. "So now this is my fault. It was a joke, and she clearly exaggerated it." To Ethan shot her a look colder than she had ever seen from him. "She did nothing. You chose to target the most powerful woman in the room without understanding the strength she carries." Madison opened her mouth, but no words came. Before she could recover, the room vibrated with the sound of notifications ringing from every direction. Guests, partners, investors all reached for their phones, and the same statement flashed across every screen: Helix Capital hereby terminates all collaborations with Clark Quantum Technologies due to violation of the Equity and Integrity Clause, Section 7, Paragraph 3, Item A. The boundary between chaos and silence collapsed. This moment was no longer news. It was catastrophe. A few shareholders muttered in despair, "It is over. The company is finished. There is nothing he can do now." Ethan felt his skull throb, as if someone were hammering metal inside it. Yet in the middle of the spiraling chaos, Ava remained seated, champagne dripping from her chin onto her hand, her eyes fixed on Madison, with an expression that seemed to say she had long foreseen this outcome. There was no hatred, no fury, only the quiet gaze of someone witnessing a downfall crafted by the hands that deserved it. While Madison trembled, a Helix employee approached Ava and gently set a white cloth on her shoulder. "Ms. Coleman, we sincerely apologize for what happened. Everything has been documented and sent to the executive board." Ava nodded. She said nothing, but inside her mind, a memory stirred the night 2 years earlier, when a European executive made a crude joke about her body in front of colleagues, and Helix watched in silence. That night, She walked out, collapsing an $800 million deal within 24 hours. It was the night she decided every future Helix contract must include the integrity clause, a shield she knew would protect the company from partnering with those who did not deserve its name. Tonight, that clause returned like a precise strike, allowing no room for escape. Ethan clung to the table to keep from collapsing into a chair. He dialed Margaret Hill, Helix's chief legal counsel. "Margaret, tell me there is something, anything we can do." On the other end, Margaret's voice was steady and chilling. "Ethan, I will read the exact clause. Any act of racial discrimination or public humiliation from a partner's associated individual shall result in immediate termination of the contract without further consultation." The clause does not evaluate intent. It evaluates impact. Ethan's palm grew damp as he gripped the table. But Madison she only. "Over 40 devices captured everything," Margaret replied. "It is spreading online. The Helix board has already held an emergency vote. The decision was unanimous." A dead silence followed. Then Margaret's voice softened only slightly. "Ava wrote that clause. She rarely enforces it. But once activated, there is no reversing it." Ethan placed the phone on the table, his face drained of color, as if he had watched his own future sliced cleanly away. Then Madison's phone vibrated again. A flood of messages rolled in. Videos, comments, posts with the hashtag #ChampagneGate. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice cracking, as she watched her own image spreading across the internet, along with her clearly audible words. "Oh, please, I did not even see you there. You blended into the background too easily." It was not just an offensive remark. It was evidence, proof of discrimination she could not deny. And as hundreds of thousands of people began commenting, condemning and raging, Madison stumbled backward like a child caught unleashing consequences far bigger than she understood. "Ethan, help me say something." Ethan looked at her in a silence so long the entire room felt suspended. She had never feared his gaze until this moment. "Madison," Ethan said, his voice hoarse, "you destroyed our future." With a single bottle of champagne. On the other side of the room, Ava rose to her feet. Her gaze swept across Madison. One last time. No victory, no vengeance, only the quiet sadness of someone witnessing a destiny long overdue. Then she turned away. She did not look back. That night, no one realized they had witnessed the opening moment of a monumental battle where one woman would rise from humiliation to become a symbol, and another would begin her descent into the endless abyss carved by her own pride. Ava did not seek revenge. She simply allowed the truth to do its work. And the truth always wins. As the elegant background music struggled to mask the chaos, spreading like an oil slick across the surface of the night, Ethan Clark stepped out of the ballroom and into a small backstage conference room, the door slamming shut behind him, like a period marking the end of what he once called a future. The room originally meant for performers to prepare before going on stage had now become a chamber of judgment. The cold white lighting fell across Ethan's face, highlighting the shock that had begun to take root in his eyes. His phone screen glowed brightly, displaying an incoming call from Margaret Hill, Helix's chief legal counsel, the one person Ethan hoped might offer him an escape, no matter how narrow. He swiped to answer his voice, trembling despite his attempt to steady it. "Margaret, tonight, is there any way we can number her?" One word, sharp as a slowly drawn blade, but delivered with a finality that made Ethan's chest tighten. Clause 12, Section 3, Integrity Provision. It was created to protect Helix from ethical threats posed by partners. There are no exceptions. Ethan swallowed, his throat burning. One action, one moment, does that really outweigh 2 years of negotiation? Margaret exhaled, but it was not sympathy. It was the sound of someone forced to repeat a truth no one wants to hear. The clause evaluates impact, not intent. The video has reached over 1 million views in 18 minutes. Madison publicly humiliated Ava with a clearly discriminatory remark. Helix cannot partner with any organization whose leadership or affiliates display such behavior. Margaret, it was just Madison. Ethan tried to find words. None existed. The truth could not be bent any more. Margaret cut in. Ethan, you know who Ava is within Helix. She is not just an employee. She shaped the company's global brand vision. She is the face of most communication strategies. She is the woman who walked out of an $800 million negotiation because of one racist comment. And that moment is what led Helix to implement the integrity clause in all contracts moving forward. Ethan froze. Not even a North American winter carried the cold now climbing his spine. She is the one who requested that clause. Yes, Margaret replied. Ava Coleman put that clause there after the first time she was disrespected in a professional setting. When a woman has to step through hundreds of barriers just to sit at a negotiation table, she will protect her worth however she must. Ethan pressed his fingers against his temples, feeling the world collapse. The door creaked open, and Madison appeared. Her face was pale with fear. Mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes, making her look like a cracked porcelain doll. Ethan, say something to me. Ethan looked at his wife as if she were a stranger. Madison, do you understand what you have done? Madison shook her head, lips trembling with panic, though her voice still held a trace of its familiar arrogance. I just teased her. Everyone teases each other. Didn't you see the way she looked at me? She acted like she was some kind of queen. Ethan slammed his hand on the table, the sound exploding like a gunshot. You did not tease her. You humiliated her. In front of 300 people, at a gala being streamed live. You poured champagne on a senior representative from our partner company, the head of their communications division. And you did it to a woman of color. Do you not understand how severe this is? Madison froze, then burst into tears. But it was the dramatic, performative kind, not the kind that comes from understanding. I was drunk. I didn't mean to, Ethan. Stared at her disappointment, rising with exhaustion. Do you know why Ava didn't react? Because she knew you would self-destruct. You did not humiliate Ava. You signed this company's death sentence. Madison gasped. I cannot accept that one comment, one impulsive act, can destroy $5.1 billion. That makes no sense. Ethan shook his head. It is not nonsense. It is ethics. This clause exists because the world has changed, and Ava represents that change. Madison stepped closer, clutching Ethan's sleeve. You cannot abandon me. You promised I was your other half. Ethan looked at her, and this time his eyes delivered a verdict without appeal. Madison, I am not abandoning you. You jumped into the abyss yourself. At that moment, Ethan's phone vibrated again. A new email. He opened it. From the Investor Relations Department, 6 major clients have submitted immediate termination notices due to concerns about ethical risk. Ethan collapsed into a chair. Dear God, Madison's last layer of confidence crumbled. Ethan, I am sorry, I will talk to Ava. No, Ethan said, his voice now nothing but ashes. You do not understand that you cannot fix this with an apology. Madison stared at him, desperate, like someone standing at the threshold of her own execution. Then what do I do? Ethan closed his eyes, head bowed, gathering what little strength he had to deliver the sentence that would mark the beginning of a new, irreversible chapter in both their lives. You accept that we have lost everything. Madison collapsed into the chair across from him, her eyes empty, as if she were watching the funeral of her own life. And in that cramped backstage room, Ethan Clark finally understood that his empire did not die because of a bowed business decision or a treacherous partner. It died because of a champagne bottle, though not because of the liquid inside. It died because of the arrogance he had allowed to grow inside his own home. Ava Coleman didn't destroy the Clark quantum empire. Madison Clark did that. Ava simply spoke the words, "Proceed," and with that, fate was sealed. 30 minutes after the champagne incident, while the crowd outside still buzzed like a shaken beehive, Ethan Clark stepped into the emergency conference room on the 3rd floor of the Grand Pavilion Hotel alongside the 8 board members of Clark Quantum Technologies. The air inside was colder than anything the air conditioning could produce, as if someone had opened a door to their future and revealed nothing but the shadow of disaster. Every face around the obsidian conference table carried the same expression: anger, disappointment, and fear. The silence was not the silence of a meeting. It was the silence before an execution. David Pierce, the chief financial officer, who had been with Ethan since the days when their startup operated out of a garage, stood first. His voice trembled with restrained fury. Ethan, our stock has dropped 18% in less than 1 hour. 18%. Because of your wife's lack of control. Another board member, Catherine Rhodes, leaned forward with both hands on the table. It was not just lack of control, Ethan. It was a racist act recorded by dozens of people and broadcast across the world. We cannot survive with leadership tied to an image like that. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to insist he was not Madison, that he was not responsible for her actions, that he led with ethics and intelligence. But the name Madison lodged in his throat like a heavy stone he could not swallow. Chairman Thomas Blake slammed a stack of documents onto the table. Have you read Helix's notices? They are announcing the reason for termination tomorrow morning. And when they state that Madison publicly humiliated their representative, he pointed at the projection screen. This will be the face of Clark Quantum. On the screen was the clear image of Madison pouring champagne over Ava's head. Everyone in the room had already seen the video hundreds of times in the past 30 minutes, but seeing it here, under harsh white lighting, while 8 powerful people judged every second of it, transformed it into undeniable evidence. No one spoke. Then Thomas sat his voice low, but carrying the weight of a verdict. Ethan, this company lost $5.1 billion because of one action by your wife. We have to protect shareholders, employees, the future. And we need to know what you intend to do about Madison. Ethan felt his heart tighten. What do you mean? Catherine crossed her arms. We mean you have a choice. Madison is the greatest ethical liability we have ever faced. We cannot allow her to appear with you represent the company or be connected to any public activity. If even one more photo surfaces, we lose what remains. David added, if you do not publicly distance yourself from Madison, investors will cancel contracts by next week. They will view you as enabling racial discrimination. Ethan leaned back, collapsing into his chair like a man struck down. He loved Madison, or at least he used to, but the version of her he loved had faded through the years, as she drowned herself in glamour, social status, and performance. She was no longer the woman who stood by him when they built the company from nothing. She had become the persona she worshipped, beautiful, powerful, but hollow and dangerous. A soft beep came from the screen. A message appeared from someone Ethan did not expect to intervene at a moment like this, Victor Hale. Ethan opened the message. "I need to join the meeting. This is not just Clark Quantum's issue." Ethan frowned. Why would Victor? Before he finished, the conference room door opened and Victor Hale entered with the posture of a man holding the final answer. He did not sit. He did not smile. He simply placed a folder onto the table. "I am here as a representative of Helix Capital," David shot up. "You are not Helix staff. You are our private investor," Victor replied in a low, cutting voice. "I am a private investor in Clark Quantum, but at Helix I oversee cultural assessment for partnerships above $1 billion. The room erupted in murmurs. Thomas frowned. "We were never informed of this." Victor nodded once. "Correct. You were not informed. The intent was to observe your corporate culture without the distortion of formal communication, and tonight I have collected enough." He put his phone on the table and played a recording. Victor's voice sounded from the video taken during the gala. "She's about to do something stupid." 1 second later, the footage showed Madison raising the champagne bottle filmed from Victor's position to Ava's right. Madison stared at the screen in horror. "You were following me." Victor looked directly at her. "I was observing partner integrity, and you provided more than enough data." Ethan felt his chest tighten once more. "Victor, does this mean Helix planned all of this?" Victor nodded. "Helix never signs a multi-billion-dollar agreement without knowing exactly who their partner truly is. We do not judge companies by their presentations. We judge by behavior. In moments, people do not realize they are being observed." He paused. Madison's conduct was the final test. Ethan slumped into his chair, a cold sweat forming at his temples. "And we failed." Victor shook his head. "No. Madison failed. You are simply left to carry the consequences." The room fell into crushing silence, as though a wall had collapsed on top of them all. Thomas braced himself against the table. "Ethan, the board needs an answer. You will sever ties with Madison, or you will sign your resignation as Chief Executive Officer." Ethan closed his eyes. 2 years of negotiations, 3,000 employees, the future of national quantum innovation, all swirled through his mind. Then he opened his eyes and looked around the table. "I need 48 hours. Thomas nodded. "You have 48 hours. After that, we vote on removal." When Ethan left the conference room, his legs felt numb, as though they did not belong to him. Stepping into the dim hallway, he saw Madison leaning against the wall, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Ethan, what did they say?" Ethan looked at the woman who once meant everything to him, but now in this brutal moment he saw only one truth. They said, "You are the reason this company is about to lose everything." Madison collapsed. Ethan turned away. He no longer had the strength to catch her. There were no choices left to save the past, only choices that could save the future. And that future might no longer include Madison. When the board meeting ended and the verdict hung over Ethan Clark like a suspended blade, he walked toward the hotel suite, designated as the organizer's resting room. The hallway felt heavy, thick, as if a storm had just swept through, leaving behind only the smell of air freshener and the crushing silence of people avoiding each other's eyes. Madison Clark sat curled up on a long bench against the wall, her legs drawn in her hands, clenched so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, making her look like a wax figure melting under a spotlight. When Ethan opened the door and stepped in, Madison shot up, as if she had just seen the last life raft in a flood, swallowing her whole. Ethan. What did they say? They are not, they cannot. You have to tell them something, you have to. Her voice cracked between sobs, but Ethan did not answer immediately. He closed the door slowly, leaning against it, as though he needed the support to keep from collapsing. In his eyes there was no anger, left only an old, exhausted sorrow and a disillusionment so deep it left no room for argument. Madison Ethan, began his voice, thin as a fraying thread. They gave me 48 hours. Madison's eyes widened. 48 hours for what? To apologize, to explain, to show them we are still good partners. I can do that. I can talk too. Ava. Ethan cut in the sharpness in his tone, halting her instantly. There is nothing you can do to change this. Madison trembled. Ethan, please. They gave me 48 hours. Ethan continued, every word heavy as stone, to choose between two options. Madison swallowed hard, fear spreading across her face. What options? Ethan stepped away from the door and approached the small table in the center of the room. He placed 2 thick folders on it, the ones his assistant had handed him minutes earlier. He pushed them gently toward Madison, like someone sliding 2 cards that would decide a life. The first option, Ethan said, sitting across from her, is for you to offer a public apology. A direct video. Not a notes app statement. No blaming alcohol. No excuses. No claiming you did not know. You will say clearly that your actions were racist. You will take full responsibility. Madison's face drained of color as if slapped. Ethan, I cannot if I do that. Then Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled. That is the more merciful option. Madison's voice cracked, and the second Ethan opened the other folder. Every page inside was a thunderclap. Divorce. Just 2 words, yet they hit with enough force to make Madison grip the edge of the table to stay upright. Ethan, you are not serious. We have been married for 12 years. You cannot, I can. Ethan replied, his tone without hesitation, without wavering. The board needs a clear separation between you and me. If not, they will vote to remove me as Chief Executive Officer. Not only that, investors will flee, projects will freeze, employees will lose their jobs. Clark Quantum will collapse within 6 months. Madison shook her head rapidly, as if rejecting reality could make it fade. You are blaming me. Everything is falling on me, but I only— No, Ethan said, not loudly, but with unwavering firmness. I am telling the truth. You did not just pour champagne on our partner's representative. You poured it on 5,000 employees. You poured it on our future. And now I have to choose between my career, my responsibility, and you. Madison sank into the chair, covering her face with her hands. Ethan, please, you cannot leave me. Ethan looked at her, and behind his eyes was the fatigue of years buried under Gala's rehearsed smiles and the performative charm Madison had turned into a lifestyle. Madison, Ethan said softly, though the truth in his words was sharp. I am not leaving you because you made a mistake tonight. I am leaving because you cannot see what the mistake is. I am leaving because you called the public humiliation of a black woman a joke. I am leaving because you have become someone I no longer recognize. Madison raised her head, her voice cracked and trembling. Then if I choose to apologize, what happens? Everything goes back. You stay with me. Ethan shook his head gently. Nothing goes back, but you can at least keep me from losing the company. Keep employees from losing their jobs. Keep me from becoming a cautionary tale. Madison stared at the two folders. To apologize meant losing face, losing reputation, becoming the center of national judgment. To divorce meant losing her husband, her status, everything she clung to. Finally she looked up, eyes red, voice breaking. I cannot choose. I cannot do either. I will handle it myself. Ethan stared at her, knowing that answer was no different from rejecting both options. Madison, do not do anything reckless. I am not reckless, Madison said, wiping her tears, her eyes shifting from despair to something darker. I will tell my side of the story. Ethan felt his heart drop. Madison, stop. I will not let Ava destroy my life. Without fighting back, Madison snapped her voice, rising like shattering glass. Who does she think she is? I will make the world hear the truth. Ethan moved toward her, trying to take her hand, but Madison yanked away. If you will not stand with me, then you have already chosen. Those words cut deeper than any blade. Madison had chosen neither apology nor responsibility. She had chosen the only weapon she knew, denial, blame, and twisting the narrative to save herself. Ethan watched the door slam behind her, dread settling in his chest, heavier than anything he had experienced in his entire career. He knew Madison was about to sow the seeds of a storm, far bigger than anything they had witnessed that night. And when that storm arrived, it would not only consume Madison, it would consume Ethan, the company, and whatever remained of their life together. The 48-hour countdown had begun, and the woman who just walked out with streaked mascara and a heart full of vengeance would ignite everything. No one could save her. No one could save them. There was no path back. Only the truth, advancing toward them, carrying the force of a verdict that could never be undone. Madison Clark left the hotel room like a whirlwind, her red-rimmed eyes and mascara-smeared face, making her look like a ghost of herself. But beneath that wreckage was not remorse, not fear, but a dark, stubborn conviction. She believed she still had power, that if she simply told the story her way, she could flip the narrative. She did not understand that the world had already shifted, while she remained trapped in an illusion of who she had been 3 years ago. That made her dangerous, because a desperate person who knows they are wrong can still be saved. But a desperate person who believes they are right can burn down an entire city. Madison called the luxury PR manager she used during her smaller scandals. I need you to release a statement. Immediately. We need to fight back. But the line stayed silent for a few seconds before the reply came. Madison, my company cannot represent you this time. We just received notice that if we take your side, several major clients will cut ties with us. Madison froze. You are saying you are refusing me. I am sorry. You should post it yourself. We cannot take the risk. And the call ended. Madison hurled her phone against the wall, the shattering sound ringing out like the first gunshot in a long, inevitable downfall. But that was only the first cut. While Madison scrambled to escape with lies, the truth outside was already sprinting thousands of steps ahead of her. 33 million views, 452,000 comments, 280,000 tweets with the hashtag #ChampagneGate. Madison had become the national symbol of racial discrimination overnight. Fashion brands she once promoted cut ties instantly. Charity galas removed her name from their VIP lists. Friends who clinked glasses with her at every party, who praised her, who kissed up to her, every single one went silent. When she texted one of her closest friends, the reply was only 3 words, Tao Kong Din, meaning I am not getting involved. Madison stood in the hotel room, feeling the world fold in on her. While she clawed for whatever scraps of power she had left, Ethan Clark was walking into the worst day of his life. After returning home from the board meeting, he received an email from Investor Relations. 17 major clients had cancelled contracts within 3 hours. Estimated loss, $1.8 billion. Ethan felt as if someone had slammed a block of concrete into his chest. He knew he had to decide. If he stayed with Madison, he would lose the company. If he chose the company, he would lose the woman he had once loved, though that love had thinned year by year as Madison chased hollow glamour. But before he could act, Madison acted first in the worst possible way. She posted a video on social media, without advisors, without thought, without control. I am not racist, Madison said, through a shaky voice. Ava Coleman provoked me. She walks around like she is a queen and insulted me in front of everyone. 8 seconds after the video went live, the first response came from Ava herself. She said very little. She simply reposted the video with 3 words, Camera Kong, Noi Doi, meaning the camera does not lie. And attached was the clearest clip from the gala, Madison pouring champagne, the smug smile on her face, and the sentence that made the entire country recoil, I did not see you there. You blended into the background too easily. 3 minutes later, Madison's video was drowning in hundreds of thousands of angry comments, attacks, and call-outs. Madison burst into tears, shaking, as she read thousands of accounts calling her the face of discrimination or the Karen of the decade. But the worst blow did not come from social media. It came when Ethan walked into the room with a stack of papers in his hand. His face was stone. Madison, you just did something I cannot save you from. Madison rushed to him, trying to throw her arms around him. Ethan, I am scared. I just wanted to defend myself. They are turning me into a monster. It is not them, Ethan said, avoiding her eyes. It is you, and you made it worse. He placed the papers on the table. Divorce papers. Madison collapsed into a chair, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Ethan, you cannot leave me. I promise I will change. I will apologize. I will do anything. Ethan shook his head. It is too late. He had tried to hold on, tried to protect her. But Madison didn't know when to stop. And now she had dragged him into the abyss with her. When Ethan walked out, the door closed behind him, sealing off a chapter Madison had believed would last forever. But her freefall had not ended yet. The next morning, police officers knocked on her hotel door. Mrs. Madison Clark. Yes, that is me. You are being summoned for harassment, pouring liquid on another person in a public space, disturbing public order, and intentionally violating personal dignity. Madison went still, handcuffs locked around her wrists. Camera flashes exploded like blades. And for the first time in her life, Madison Clark, the glamorous woman of Chicago's elite, was led away, wearing a cheap coat, hair disheveled makeup, ruined, looking no different from someone who had lost everything. Meanwhile, Ethan walked into the lobby of Clark Quantum, under the heavy stares of hundreds of employees. No one said a word, but the truth was written clearly in their eyes. You chose the wrong person to build your life with. Ethan stood in the center of the company, feeling 10 years older than the night before. And he knew the board meeting later that afternoon would deliver his final verdict. Madison lost everything. Ethan lost everything. And in the hollow space between their collapsing lives, Ava Coleman became the symbol of an undeniable truth. Racial discrimination does not only destroy the dignity of the person targeted, it destroys the life of the person who commits it. And Madison Clark had stepped into the longest winter of her life, a winter with no warmth, no status, no one left standing beside her. Only herself and the darkness she created. On the spring morning, when Ava Coleman stepped onto the stage at the Helix Impact Summit, sunlight poured through the glass ceiling and fell across her shoulders in bright golden ribbons, making her figure look as if it were sculpted from light itself. 3 months had passed since the night Madison Clark turned herself into a symbol of cruelty, but Ava had been different. She transformed that moment into a beginning, not an ending. And while Madison fell into the abyss, Ava rose to the summit without stepping on a single soul. When she announced the Coleman Ascend Fund, worth $5.1 billion, repurposed entirely from the cancelled Clark Quantum deal, the auditorium rose to its feet in a sweeping wave of applause. It was the resurrection of justice, the triumph of dignity over the cruelty that had lingered far too long in the elite rooms where Ava once had to bow her head. Across the city, in a small rented apartment in Lincoln Park, Ethan Clark sat on a worn, upholstered chair, watching live-stream footage of Ava's keynote. His suit was old, his tie had lost its crispness, and strands of grey threaded through his hair, but his eyes were different now, less arrogant, less proud, and for the first time in his life, humbled by his own mistakes. The brutal end of his marriage to Madison had forced him to confront the truth he had ignored for years. He had built his entire career on a rotten foundation he pretended not to see. And ironically, it was Ava, the woman Madison tried to humiliate, who made him finally wake from that illusion. In that moment, Ethan did not see Ava as Madison's victim. He saw her as a mirror reflecting his own moral failure. When another round of applause thundered through the speakers, Ethan closed his eyes. No more Clark Quantum. No more. Hundreds of millions of dollars. No more title of Chief Executive Officer. Only a man learning the most fundamental lesson of all dignity is the only capital that must never be lost. That afternoon, Ethan left the apartment carrying a sealed envelope containing the special invitation Ava had sent through her attorney, "Meet me at Helix campus, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. AC." He did not know why she invited him. He did not know whether it was an opportunity or a warning. But he went because staying meant remaining buried in the ashes of his old life. The Helix campus felt like a different world, open, modern, radiant with light, filled with the laughter and confidence of young founders Ethan had once dismissed as not prestigious enough simply because they did not come from the universities he revered. Ava stood on the second-floor balcony, poised in a white suit. When she saw Ethan enter, she tilted her head slightly in acknowledgement. Her gaze no longer held anger, no longer held hurt, only the calm maturity of someone who had walked through war and remained standing. "Thank you for coming," Ava said as Ethan approached. Her voice was as steady as a lake after a storm. Ethan bowed his head slightly, feeling his hands grow cold with something he had rarely felt in his life. Shame. "Ava, I do not expect forgiveness. I only want to say I didn't invite you to hear an apology." Ava interrupted, not harshly, but with the sharp precision of a fruit knife. "I invited you because I want you to see what you could have built." She led him down a glass corridor, where young quantum startups were pitching ideas, where scientists of color, women immigrants, people Clark Quantum had never invested in, simply because they did not belong to its familiar ecosystem, were discussing breakthroughs. They do not need me, Ava said. They need opportunity. Ethan looked at every face, bright, confident, determined. And he knew she was right. You had that opportunity, Ava said quietly, but you placed it in the wrong hands. Ethan swallowed. I know. I do not want to forgive Madison. Ava continued, her eyes drifting toward the courtyard where students conversed under the sun. But I do not want to hate you either. You made mistakes, but you chose not to continue making them. Ethan looked at her exhaustion in his eyes but sincerity in his voice. Ava, I want to understand why you sent me that photo. Why you left that note. Ava turned back to him, her expression serene, as though the answer had always been simple. Because I didn't build this fund to destroy anyone, she said. I built it to rebuild. I do not want people to fear their failures. I want them to understand that you can rebuild from ruins if you choose to. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then the question he had carried for months finally slipped out. Do you think I can rebuild? It is not what I think, Ava replied. It is what I see. She handed him a thin folder, something that looked very much like a job offer, a technical mentorship role for quantum startups within her fund. No fame, no authority, no salary. Just a small equity share, and no guarantee of success. A second chance, but not an easy road. Ethan opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly. I do not deserve this. Worthiness, Ava said, is not something you have. It is something you create. From the conference room window, wind blew a few sheets of paper across the table. Ethan picked one up and reread the first line. Rebuilding from truth, not ego. He looked up. I accept. Ava smiled for the first time since that gala night. Welcome to the new world. Meanwhile, at a discount store on Grand Avenue, Madison Clark knelt on the floor, scrubbing the spot where a champagne bottle had shattered into a golden stain. The smell of alcohol rose sharply, burning her throat. On the television mounted in the corner, the news replayed Ava at the summit celebrated by the world. Madison looked up. She saw Ava glowing. She saw herself in a cheap red uniform. And for the first time in her life, Madison whispered, that should have been me. But she was wrong. Because Ava did not build her power by stepping on others. Ava built it by standing up after being stepped on. As the sun set, the Helix campus glowed with evening lights, and Ethan signed his new contract slowly, carefully, like a vow. And Ava stood by the window, watching the city lights exhaling softly, like someone who had finally set down the last burden of the past. In that quiet moment, she understood some stains cannot be washed away. But those same stains can become the ink that writes the next chapter of your life, if you are brave enough to hold the pen. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and power dynamics, the story of Ava and Madison is not merely a personal clash, but a razor-sharp lesson for every modern institution. Power no longer belongs to those who speak. The loudest possess the most wealth or hold the highest titles. It belongs to those who choose to face the truth with integrity. Madison believed humiliation could establish her position, but Ava proved that dignity is what determines who remains standing in the end. And just like any system, a person is only truly sustainable when the foundation they stand on is built from decency, not arrogance. If this story made you reflect on fairness, dignity, and the strength of rising at the right moment, make sure to like the video to help spread this message and subscribe so you do not miss the journeys ahead where truth always finds its voice. Before you go, leave a comment with exactly 3 words. Keep your dignity.